Government has declared the first Saturday in November as National Children's Day, and this is to raise awareness and promote the realization of children's rights in the country. We're joined now by Lamprecht, who does a lot of good work with women and men against child abuse, and he joins us to talk further about the important initiative and what are the practical ways to make sure that the day is effective and not just paying lip service. Luke, good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Just the fact that it just went about without any event necessarily, what does that say about the National Day or National Children's Day and how we observe it?
Well, it's symbolic of how the country sees and treats children in general. So generally, children's issues are subsumed under the 16 days of activism, or they're portrayed as victims in the Child Protection Week. Very seldom do we see children celebrated. And the big challenge with the fact that there was very little said by government around Children's Day really talks to me about the fact that they don't really include children in any of their policy and decision-making in any coherent or significant way.
And are you saying maybe a part of that is the fact that they have now clustered all of these designated groups under one ministry, and in effect, it should actually be separated because of the plight of children in the country?
No doubt. And the other issue is that obviously women don't want to be lumped with children because then you're infantilizing women. You know, the disabled don't want to be lumped with children because then you are sort of making adult disabled people into children. And children are not adults because they don't have the agency to access their rights. So they are entirely distinct populations.
All right, let's look at the rights of children as espoused in the Constitution and the Children's Act, and how, as communities, these are, one, implemented, observed, and protected. Just give us a sense of whether the compliance level of protecting children's rights as a society.
Look, I think our compliance level is shocking. And I think the biggest problem with the children's rights in our country is the fact that they actually, I think, regressive. So constitutionally, we are meant to progressively recognize the rights of children. So let's take an example of the first right of all children in terms of Section 28 of our Constitution. It says a child is a right to a name and a nationality from birth. Now, you get the Department of Social Development in Gauteng, who has now issued a directive to make what we call baby savers illegal. So those are those doors in the wall where you can safely relinquish your baby rather than discarding your baby on the street. Now, we have babies that we are getting on the streets of Johannesburg that are found who their births were never celebrated and their deaths never mourned. They're buried in paupers' graves with numbers and no names. Now, if that is the beginning of life for children in our country in terms of the first right of all children to a name and nationality from birth and a right to life, we're doing a poor job.
And how does this impact on foreign nationals? Because there is that kind of balance that from a humanitarian point of view and the bilateral agreements in terms of human rights that South Africa is obligated to observe, but also putting a pressure on the healthcare sector, and the fact that it's not a given if a foreign national gives birth in South Africa that their children will necessarily have the national citizenship. What does this mean for them?
Look, I think that the right to a name and nationality from birth talks to the whole asylum seeker, refugee, unaccompanied minor problem in the country. Because what we're seeing is that, I mean, there's various ways children enter the system. So if we talk about the rights of foreign children, some children enter the country on their parents' asylum documents, or some children come over the borders unaccompanied. Now, you know, children, regardless of their nationality, should be given these rights, and certainly to a name and nationality from birth. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a name and nationality in our country of South Africa, but they do need a recognition of their right to exist. Otherwise, they are ghosts. And if children don't have the first right of children in our Constitution, I'm talking about all children, including foreign national children, if they don't have a name and a nationality, even if it's not South African, they cannot access any other right. They cannot access healthcare. They cannot access schooling. And if they're unaccompanied minors, they can access absolutely nothing. Because unless there's an adult agent there to assist children to access their rights are simply not met.
And let's look at the responsibility of the Social Development, Department of Social Development, particularly when it comes to children that we see on a day-to-day basis on the streets of Johannesburg, major cities, whether they're accompanied or not, one is not sure. But in most cases, at least those that are of adolescence or, teenage years seem to be on their own, begging for money or food, doing some act or the other to try and make a living. Have we become so insensitive to it that it's just become part of, the tapestry of South Africa? We just keep it moving and we have more and more people out in the streets begging.
So, it's an excellent question, because the children who are used by their parents to beg on the street are the first complication, because what happens is those children certainly should not be used to make money. But if those parents leave their children at home without any care, they're accused of abandoning their children. If they take their children with them, they're accused of using their children to sort of get more money. So in other words, people are more sympathetic to parents on the street with their children, so they leverage that. And as a result, we don't have any mechanism by which to deal with that, because they can't abandon their children without care because they don't have money to pay for care, and they should also not be on the street with the children. So that's a complete gap in our system. The issue of children living and working on the street is a very complex issue, because when the new Children's Act was promulgated, these children actually fell in a new category in terms of the reasons for children to be found in need of care and protection, and the places that were provided for them, which was historically shelters. You'll remember places in Joburg like Twilight or Streetwise. There were many street children shelters, and those shelters were also made illegal, because the idea was that we had to formalize their placement, and the shelters had to be places where the children were formally placed through court. They couldn't just come and go. And what happened then is you got two categories of children and homes. You got the shelters, who either could transform to child and youth care centers or closed. And then you had a category of children who could be brought into care and could stay in care and didn't run away. And those children were housed and dealt with in the child and youth care system through the children's court. And then you had the other category of children, which is the category of children you're talking about, who remained on the street. And then the last thing that happened was that there was then an argument between the city, so the municipal social workers, and the Department of Social Development in terms of the regional statutory social workers. And the city social workers who went out to do the work with the young people on the streets, they called the Displaced Persons Unit, they had no authority to remove children. But when they tried to get social development involved to place children, that just simply didn't happen, because there was nowhere to place the children because of the split of these institutions. So that's why I say some of the rights of the young people have actually been regressive in our country, and there's actually been a split in terms of the people responsible for caring for children and the institutions, and it's left a massive hole.
Luke, thank you so much for your time. That's where we'll have to leave it. That is the head of Advocacy Group of Women and Men Against Child Abuse, Luke Lamprecht, and just talking about the pressures that they have as a civic organization in trying to create awareness about the rights of children and also finding them places of safety. We'll certainly be engaging Luke at another time.